The hospital room was a tomb of silence, broken only by the rhythmic beep of machines that tethered 16-year-old Leela Bennett to a life she no longer wanted. Her once vibrant eyes, the color of summer skies, stared blankly at the ceiling, tracing cracks that weren't there, as if searching for a way out of her broken body. Paralyzed from the neck down after a car accident 6 months ago, Leela had become a shadow of the girl who once danced in her father's boardroom, twirling in a sundress while he, the CEO of a tech empire, watched with a smile. Now, her world was confined to a sterile bed, her dreams shattered like the car that had stolen her legs, her arms, her hope. Her father, Richard Bennett, sat beside her, his tailored suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He was a man who could buy anything, except a miracle for his daughter. The doctors had been blunt: Leela would never walk again, never paint again, never feel the grass beneath her feet. Each prognosis chipped away at her spirit, until all that remained was a girl who refused to speak, refused to eat, refused to live. The weight of her despair pressed against the room, suffocating everyone who entered. Nurses whispered in the halls about the CEO's daughter, the girl who had given up. But in a small town an hour away, a single father named Tom Harper, a man with calloused hands and a heart scarred by loss, was about to change everything with a whisper: "I'll help her." If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of hope, please hit that like button, leave a comment, share this story, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Let's spread the light together. Leela's accident had been a headline for weeks, splashed across news outlets with the kind of sensationalism that made her father's jaw clench. Tech mogul's daughter in tragic crash, they wrote, as if her life could be reduced to a clickbait title. Richard had shielded her from the cameras, moving her to a private hospital wing, but he couldn't shield her from the truth. The drunk driver who hit her had walked away unscathed, while Leela's spine had snapped like a twig. At first, she had fought, gritting her teeth through physical therapy, forcing smiles for her father, clinging to the belief that she could defy the odds. But hope is a fragile thing, and hers eroded with every failed attempt to move a finger, every night spent staring at a body that no longer felt like hers. By the time spring turned to summer, Leela had stopped speaking altogether. She refused visitors, even her best friend, MIA, who left tear-soaked voicemails Leela never answered. Richard, a man accustomed to solving problems with money and influence, was powerless. He hired the best specialists, flew in experimental treatments from Europe, but nothing could reach the part of Leela that was slipping away, her spirit. Tom Harper, meanwhile, lived in a world far removed from the Bennett's penthouse suites and private jets. His small house in Willow Creek smelled of sawdust and coffee, its walls lined with photos of his late wife, Sarah, and their 8-year-old daughter, Ellie. Tom was a carpenter, his hands rough from years of shaping wood into furniture that told stories of care and craftsmanship. 3 years ago, Sarah's battle with cancer had ended, leaving Tom to raise Ellie alone. The grief had nearly broken him, but Ellie's laughter, her boundless curiosity, kept him tethered to life. He worked long hours to keep her in art classes, her passion, and every night he read to her from books Sarah had loved. Tom wasn't rich, but he was rich in love, and that love had taught him something the world often forgets: hope can be rebuilt, piece by piece, even from ruins. He'd heard about Leela's accident on the radio, a fleeting mention. During his drive to a job site, something about her story stuck with him, though he couldn't say why. Maybe it was the way the reporter described her silence, her retreat from the world. It reminded him of the months after Sarah's death, when he'd sat in the dark, wondering if he'd ever feel whole again. Their paths crossed by chance, or perhaps by fate, on a rainy afternoon in July. Richard, desperate for any spark to reignite Leela's will to live, had heard about a community art program in Willow Creek, one that welcomed children with disabilities. It was a long shot, but Leela had once loved painting, her canvases bursting with colors that seemed to spill from her soul. Maybe, Richard thought, art could reach her where medicine had failed. He drove to the community center, his sleek black car out of place among the pickup trucks and minivans. Inside, the room buzzed with children's laughter, the air thick with the smell of paint and clay. Tom was there, volunteering as he often did, helping Ellie and the other kids mold clay into lopsided animals. Richard watched from the doorway, his heart sinking as he imagined Leela's reaction. She'd hate this, he thought, the noise, the chaos, the pity. But then he saw Tom kneel beside a boy in a wheelchair, guiding his trembling hands to shape a clay star, his voice low and encouraging. The boy's face lit up, a smile breaking through his frustration. Richard didn't know why, but he felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in months, possibility. Tom noticed Richard lingering, his expensive coat dripping onto the floor. He approached, wiping clay from his hands, and introduced himself. Richard, usually guarded, found himself pouring out Leela's story, her accident, her silence, her surrender. Tom listened, his brown eyes steady, not with pity but with understanding. When Richard finished, Tom didn't offer platitudes or promises. Instead, he said, "Bring her here. Let me try." Richard hesitated. This man was a stranger, a carpenter with no medical degree, no credentials. But there was something in Tom's voice, a quiet conviction that made Richard believe, for the first time in months, that someone might understand Leela's pain. They exchanged numbers, and Richard left, unsure if he'd follow through. That night, as he sat by Leela's bedside, watching her stare at the ceiling, he made a decision. He'd take her to Willow Creek. He had nothing left to lose. The first visit was a disaster. Leela, strapped into a specialized wheelchair, glared at the community center's bright walls, her lips pressed into a thin line. The other children tried to include her, offering paints and paper, but she turned her head away, her silence louder than any scream. Richard's heart sank, but Tom didn't flinch. He sat beside her, not pushing, not speaking, just sketching on a pad of paper. Leela ignored him, but Tom kept coming back, week after week, always with his sketchpad, always with a quiet presence that didn't demand anything from her. He drew simple things, trees, birds, the curve of a river, and left the sketches on her lap. Leela never acknowledged them, but she stopped throwing them away. Richard noticed, and so did Ellie, who began sitting near Leela, chattering about her own drawings, oblivious to Leela's silence. Ellie's innocence, her lack of judgment, was like a crack in Leela's armor, small but undeniable. Weeks turned into months, and the community center became a ritual. Leela's silence persisted, but her eyes began to follow Tom's hands as he worked, the way he shaped clay or blended colors. One day, Tom brought a device he'd built himself, a simple rig that could hold a paintbrush in Leela's mouth, allowing her to control it with slight head movements. He'd spent nights in his garage, tinkering with wood and metal, thinking of Sarah, who'd loved painting, and of Leela, who'd lost it. He didn't tell Leela it was for her, he just set it up and said, "Try it, if you want." Leela stared at the brush, her jaw tight. Richard held his breath, expecting her to refuse. But then, slowly, she leaned forward, her lips closing around the brush. Her first stroke was shaky, a smear of blue across the canvas, but it was hers. The room went quiet, the other children watching, Ellie clapping her hands. Leela's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of something else, something alive. Richard turned away, his throat tight, unable to watch his daughter come back to life without breaking down himself. Tom's presence became a lifeline. He never treated Leela like she was broken, never spoke to her with the careful pity she'd grown to hate. He shared stories of his own struggles, of nights when he'd thought he couldn't go on after Sarah's death, of how Ellie's small hand in his had pulled him through. Leela began to speak, first in whispers, then in sentences, her voice rusty but growing stronger. She told Tom about the accident, the fear, the anger at her body's betrayal. He listened, not as a therapist or a savior, but as someone who'd walked through his own darkness. With Tom's help, Leela painted more, her canvases becoming bolder, filled with stormy blues and fiery reds, emotions she couldn't yet voice. Ellie became her shadow, her friend, her reason to smile. The community center, once a place of dread, became a sanctuary where Leela could be more than her wheelchair, more than her father's broken daughter. Richard watched the transformation, humbled and grateful. He'd spent his life building an empire, but it was Tom, with his quiet strength and handmade paintbrush rig, who'd given Leela back her life. He began to see the world differently, noticing the small acts of kindness that held it together, the way Ellie shared her crayons, the way the other parents at the center offered him coffee and a smile. He started volunteering, too, not as a CEO but as a father, helping kids with their projects, learning the names. The distance between him and Leela shrank, their conversations no longer strained by guilt or fear. Leela's paintings began to fill their home, each one a testament to her resilience, a reminder that hope could be rebuilt from the smallest pieces. The turning point came on a crisp autumn day, when the community center held an art show. Leela's paintings were displayed alongside the other children's, her name written in bold letters on a placard. She'd chosen a piece called Flight, a canvas of swirling blues and golds, a bird breaking free from a cage. As people milled around, admiring the work, Leela sat in her wheelchair, her chin high, her eyes bright. Tom stood beside her, his hand on Ellie's shoulder, both of them beaming. Richard watched from the back, his heart full, knowing this moment was a miracle not of medicine but of connection. Leela spoke that day, thanking the crowd, her voice clear and strong. She thanked Tom, calling him her friend, and the room erupted in applause. For the first time since the accident, Leela wasn't the CEO's paralyzed daughter. She was Leela, the artist, the girl who'd found her way back. As winter approached, Leela's life was far from perfect. She still faced challenges, physical pain, moments of frustration, the reality of a body that would never fully heal. But she had Tom, Ellie, and the community center, a family beyond the one she'd been born into. She had her art, her voice, her hope. Richard, too, had changed, trading boardroom battles for moments with his daughter, learning to value the things money couldn't buy. Tom continued to volunteer, his own heart lighter, knowing he'd honored Sarah's memory by helping Leela. The three of them, Leela, Richard, and Tom, had built something unbreakable, a bond forged in loss and rebuilt in love. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of kindness and the strength of the human spirit, please like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe to Kindness Speaks to keep spreading hope. And before you go, please leave a comment below. Tell us how this story moved you or share your own story of second chances. Your words could inspire someone else.